I want to start with some stories, okay? So these are going to be really great. It's going to make you feel good about yourself, I promise. We're going to start with some stories, some financial stories that maybe, oh good, it's not connecting, that maybe are not the best examples. There we go. So first one, has anybody here heard of Antoine Walker? Anybody know that name? That's okay. I didn't expect anybody to. Antoine Walker played in the NBA for 10 plus years over the course of his... I'm a Boston Celtics fan from the area. I loved Antoine Walker when he was playing. Made over $110 million over the course of his career. $110 million over the course of his career. And he started playing in his early 20s. If you think about that, you know, if you don't even invest that, don't even consider interest, if you just spend $2 million a year, you're going to be good to go for the rest of your life. Could you make that work? You know, $2 million a year, I could squeeze my expenses into that. Okay? This is Antoine Walker. He retired at age 33. By age 35, he was bankrupt. 2 years after he retired, bankrupt, $110 million, gone. How about this next guy? Anybody know this guy? We got a couple who know this guy. A little more well-known, made a lot more money. Iverson is reportedly broke. He famously had a personal budget, spent about $10,000 per month on food alone. You can see at that rate why that guy might be having some financial issues. He made over $150 million in his career. All gone. Completely gone. I think all of us in here individually are worth more than Allen Iverson. Believe it or not, right now, currently. You feel good about that? I mean, that's pretty good. This guy, I mean, wow. Incredible. This guy, Latrell Sprewell. Anybody remember Latrell Sprewell? He's pretty well known for an incident in practice where he attacked his coach and was choking him. He was suspended for a year. Anyway, he was actually a very good basketball player, made a lot of money, just like these other guys. And Latrell Sprewell, at the end of his career, made over $100 million, all-star. He had life at his fingertips, set for life, just like these other guys. The last year he played in the NBA, he was offered a contract extension of $15 million, okay? And probably was going to keep playing for another year after that, so maybe even as much as $30 million in that one contract extension. Latrell Sprewell rejected the offer saying, and I quote, "I have a family to feed." After that, the offer was not up. They did not renew his offer. They did not offer him a contract. Neither did any other NBA team. Never played in the NBA again. He is reportedly broke today. I'm sorry, Latrell. I'm sorry. So some statistics tell us that in professional sports, about 60% of athletes are broke within 5 years. So it's not just unique to these guys. It's a big problem. It's not just professional sports. You know this guy? You know this guy? So he's been in about 66 different movies in his life. He's in Pirates of the Caribbean. You know these films. He made, and in those films alone, he made about $300 million. In those films alone, okay? Over the course of his life, made about $650 million. And counting, he's still acting today. I don't know if you saw this, but there's a lawsuit that came out earlier this summer over Johnny Depp's financial woes. Either he's broke or he's going broke. He's suing his financial advisors for cheating him out of money. And let me just read this, because the financial advisors actually countersued. Okay, I want to read the statement that they have here. The statement they have, they say, Depp and Depp alone is fully responsible for any financial turmoil he finds himself in today. He's refused to live within his means. Depp often responded to warnings by his advisors by rebuking and cursing for issuing such warnings while increasing his extravagant lifestyle and spending and demanding that his business managers find some way to pay for it all. Some of Depp's alleged expenses include $18 million on a yacht, $4 million on a failed record label, $30,000 a month on wine, $200,000 a month on private planes, $150,000 a month on security, $300,000 a month for his personal staff, 40 personal staff, and my favorite, $3 million to shoot the ashes of his late friend Hunter S. Thompson, a mechanic, for what that's worth. I wanted us all to feel a little bit better about ourselves as we dive into this, okay? All right, so it's easy. The reason I cover some of those is that it's easy to think that if you just make a little more money, it's going to be easier to accomplish some things. You know, if you just get maybe that next salary position, that next raise, or maybe if you just, you know, are making a little more somehow, you know, win the lottery, you can plan for retirement or you can do these other things. And you know that really the issue is not how much money you're making. There's more to it than how much money you're making. And we're going to talk about that throughout the course of this week. And really many of us, many Christians and many people suffer from the same problem that Depp and Iverson and Walker and who else? Sprewell. We all suffer from the same problem. So we see something and we go, I want it. I want it, right? That's the problem for your finances. And there's a better way. And we're going to talk about some best practices, some principles from financial experts, okay? This is not going to be a Financial Peace University. I've got a couple reasons for that. It's not necessarily going to be, you have some handouts in front of you from Larry Burkett. Great information from Larry Burkett. It's not necessarily his program either. Those are free resources he makes available on his website to anybody, so you're welcome to have those and look at those. I'm not necessarily going to be a proponent of every single thing on those, but they're just helpful guides, okay? And so that's for you to take home and work on some homework there. What we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the next couple weeks. We're going to go through some very important things, some budgeting, and I'll cover those in just a minute. But what I want to focus on first this week is the goal of everything that you're doing with your finances. That's very important. And the goal for your finances has a lot more to do than just budgeting and saving and planning for retirement. There's a lot more to it than that. And I want to make sure that we get that right, because you can do everything precisely financially accurate and you can really get to retirement and have more than enough. You know, you can live cushy, you can meet some of those goals. And you know there's going to be something at the end of your life called a judgment that you have to show for. Okay? So we're going to talk about that. So your finances are more than just about having money for something else that you want to accomplish in life. There's more to it than that. We're going to talk about that today. Before we dive into that specifically, we're just an overview of the weeks here. We're going to hit budgeting next week. I have Nicole and Trey Varn. They're going to help me out with a couple of weeks. Nicole's in real estate, correct? And Trey, you're in finance. I've forgotten the title, but they also blog in the area of personal finance. Got some good stuff going on. So they're going to be helping with some of these areas. I want to look at this verse for that area of budgeting. Proverbs 13:11, wealth gained hastily will dwindle. Remember those guys. Depp and Iverson, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Gathering little by little connotes that there's some responsibility that you're taking, that you're being a steward of what you have. Gathering little by little takes planning. It takes intentionality. And that's a lot of what we need to be doing, is gathering little by little rather than just trying to get rich quick and all of that good stuff. We're going to talk about some budgeting principles, and you've got some help there in front of you in those handouts for creating your own budget. Some of you may have your own budget that's working very well, and that's great. We'll talk more about that. I'm talking about some debt payoff, some of the dangers of debt. Scripture tells us, in week 3, Scripture tells us, right, you've seen this verse, rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Can we just agree that slavery is not an ideal condition, right? It's not ideal. When you're in debt, you've got masters. You're enslaved to the mortgage, right? You can't decide, hey, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to go spend it on vacation this month. You got to pay the mortgage first, right? The credit cards, if you've got a credit card statement coming in, it's a master. You got to pay a certain amount on that credit card statement. You got to pay a certain amount to those student loans. You got to pay a certain amount to that cars. And after you've done all of your masters and taken care of all those things, then you can kind of start focusing in on the things you want to do for yourself. And that can be a tough way to live because most of your money's gone just going to debts, going to consumption in a lot of cases. After that, we're going to hit investing in retirement. Week 4, we're going to answer the question, how much money do you need for retirement? Ever thought of that? There's some ways to calculate it, okay? It gets mathematically, you got to be able to do some addition, some subtraction, maybe some division and some multiplication. But it's basic math, and if you just follow some basic math, you can do this. You don't have to be a math finance guy. You don't have to calculate internal rates of return and all that. I went through a lot of financial education in my undergrad. Love this stuff. I geek out about internal rates of return and time value of money, but you don't need to know all that for retirement. Okay, it's fine. It's not that big a deal. It's pretty simple calculations. By the way, if you retire or if your retirement years will fall into or after 2037, don't worry about. Don't plan on Social Security helping you out very much. 2037 is the year that Social Security will be underfunded officially. Okay, so that's 2037. That's 20 years away from today. I'll be 50, so I'll be. Hopefully Congress figures it out, but I'm not counting on it. So if your retirement years are in that time, you have to maybe provide entirely for yourself. Social Security, who knows, could be gone. Maybe, who knows? Maybe the Lord will come back. Who knows? But if not, we got to plan for it. Okay, we got to plan for it. Week 5, giving God's way. I used to think that when it came to your finances, that, if you just, now that I'm a Christian, I'm not going to spend everything on myself however I want to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a tithe. I'm going to give it to the church, and, I'm going to give 10% to God. I'm going to do that first. And then, bam, I'm completely financially obedient. Whatever else happens is fine. The other 90%, total consumption, as long as I give that to God, it's fine. There's no rules for the rest. And that's a problem. That's obviously not God's desire for your finances. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to talk about giving God's way, what that looks like. That's week 5. Week 6, we're going to cover some practical examples and some real stories, okay, some testimony time. We're going to cover a couple big decisions that all of us will come across in our life. Buying a car, do you buy new or used? There's some considerations there. You have to make sure you know what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish. There are some things to look at, okay? Buying a house, there's some thoughts out there on buying houses, okay? But there's some major things you need to be thinking about, that you need to be aware of, okay? 30-year, 15-year mortgage, what's the differences? What's the advantages? And you might choose one or the other, but you just need to be informed going into that decision on what the costs are and where they'll get you, because if you're not a finance person, it's really hard to read the legalese, okay? It's really hard to go through there and get all the gobbledygook. So we're going to talk about that a little bit there in week 6. This week, let's open up the Word for just a minute. We're going to talk about God's will for our finances. And I want to look at the parable of the talents in Matthew chapter 25, and I'm not going to exposit this entire parable. But I do just want to look at a couple of things really quickly. Matthew 25, it starts in verse 14. And it goes like this: "For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property." So this is a parable. Jesus is talking. There's a master and there's servants. Who is the master? The Lord. Who are the servants? We are the servants. Believers, professing believers would be the servants. And we are entrusted with something. What are we entrusted with? Whose property? His property. How much of the property is specifically your own to do whatever you want with? How much have you been given that you use specifically for just nobody else's concerns, just your own? Nothing, right? Everything you have, you've been given for a specific reason, according to this parable. Everything that you are, all of your talents, all of your abilities, all of your resources, everything for one specific thing. What is that one specific thing? Let's keep looking. I'm not going to read through everything here, but you know how this parable goes. We get to the end, the master comes back. There are a couple of servants. There's a couple good servants, and there's a bad servant. The good servants, what do? They take what they've been given, they use it in such a way that they have something to give back to the Lord at his coming. These would represent eternal rewards. This has nothing to do with how much money is in your retirement account or that beach house or whatever, right? Okay? This has to do with long-lasting returns, returns that go beyond this life. I have a quote here from C.T. Studd in a poem. It says, "Only one life to live, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. When you're talking about your budget, when you're talking about your time, when you're talking about your family, your career, anything and everything you do, it all comes down to one thing, okay? What are you doing for Christ? That's what it comes down to. That's what it boils down to. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to create our budget, and we're going to write out some goals. We're going to try and do some things that are going to be very helpful. We're going to use the wisdom of financial experts to do that. But the goal of us as believers is not to get to retirement and say, I've got $10 million, I'm financially free, I can travel the world, and I can do what I want. Right? It's not like the board game of life, where you retire in style as a millionaire, right? And whoever has the most money at the end wins. I never won that game. But it's okay, it's fine. That's not what the point of your life is about. You could die penniless, and it would be okay if you used every penny for Christ, right? That's the difference between what we're going to be talking about and what you might get from some other programs out there, okay? There are some other programs out there that have very similar ideas and financial expert advice, which is really good, and that's awesome. And I would not necessarily disagree with any of those things that are out there on the market. Okay, but there is one principle that can be left out when it comes to planning your finances, and that's the fact that there's Judgment Day coming. And that's what this is about, okay? Your finances are about Judgment Day coming, okay? So let's look at what these servants do. So the servants, the good servants, the one came, he was given 5, he had 5 more to return. And the master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had 2 talents, this is verse 22 of chapter 25, came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents, here I've made 2 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant, you have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered not. Sounds like somebody who's coming forward with some excuses, right? Sounds like somebody who knew about God, and he kind of got caught up living life the way he was living it his entire life, and he had nothing to show God for everything that God had given him. He lived his entire life for himself. This is this person, okay? His entire life he spent for himself, and he had no eternal rewards at the end. What happens to this guy? Let's keep reading. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours. But his master answered, You wicked servant, you wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sowed, or gathered where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming you should have received I should have received what was my own, with interest. And the master says, So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Cast that worthless servant into outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's very clear. People who don't live for Christ will be unmasked at the judgment, okay? The parable is very clear, and many other parables end the same way. Cast that servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's a metaphor for that person being cast into hell. Those people who spend their entire life living for themselves and spend none of their life living for Christ, they are maybe professing believers, but they really have no faith, no knowledge of Christ that impacts the way that they live. These are fake believers, okay? So I thought it would be appropriate for us all to think real hard about what we're trying to accomplish here before we actually get into the nuts and bolts of it. What we're trying to accomplish is not just getting wealthy, okay? Love Dave Ramsey, but the philosophy of his program, okay, you've heard this. It goes, live like no one else so you can live like no one else. That's kind of ambiguous. You think, well, hey, maybe that's the Great Commission he has in mind there. Well, the next phrase in his philosophy is drive like no one else so you can drive like no one else. And you think, okay, now I know where this is going. The next phrase is dress like no one else so you can dress like no one else. So the idea is be real skimpy, and don't spend all your money so that one day you can spend all your money and really enjoy it. Okay. Now, Dave Ramsey has some really good things to say, but philosophically, I differ on a few points, so that's not why we're doing Financial Peace University in here, okay? Also, it costs $110 per person. Would you be in here if it cost you $110? I didn't think so. It also costs the church licensing fees in addition to that. Dave Ramsey's sales reps got a hold of me when they saw that I was offering a finance class, and they wanted me to offer their program. It happened, true story. And I said, thank you. Do you have a free trial? I'd love to see it. And they said, no, we don't do that. And I said, sorry, see ya, bye. So there's the information. There's really two main things out there. There's Larry Burkett with crownfinancial.org, crown.org, and then there's Dave Ramsey. Larry Burkett kind of came along and invented the 7 steps. You've heard of the 7 baby steps. He was the one who really came up with the 7 steps and was offering biblical wisdom. And you'll notice on those budget sheets, he actually proposes that you tithe pre-tax. Mind blown. Wow. At the very top of his proposed budgets, tithing pre-tax. Hey, how about that instead of after tax? And then he has percentages laid out for all of his categories. That's really helpful. Not necessarily going to be the exact thing for every one of us, but it can be a starting point so that you can compare. Now, knowing what we know about us as believers, that Judgment Day is coming, that eternal rewards are the real point, we're going to be thinking about how we spend our money differently. Okay? Right? You might have a friend or a church member who's going to Haiti in 2018, the summer of 2018. They're not going to be working, so maybe they need some financial support. And you would say, hey, that's for the gospel. I'd love to give to that. That'd be awesome. That's what my finances are about, right? Yeah, that's right. It's not about the vacation home or traveling the world. That's the one that gets me. If I could really just spend all my money on me, I would travel the world. That's what I would do. Now, other people are different. They would, go after different things. Maybe it's the boat, Maybe it's the, 54th pair of shoes or handbag. Maybe it's, whatever it is, the gun. You go to Cabela's and you go, gotta have it. Gotta have that. Or maybe it's, no offense to Ed Rich, maybe you go to Dick Brooks Honda. Salesman comes out and meets you and says, oh, look at this brand new CRV. You got to get the fully loaded one. It's got the backup camera. You need a backup camera? You think, yeah, I need a backup camera. I can't back out. None of this. That's way too hard. That is a nuisance. 1 Corinthians 4:2, moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful. Okay, the goal of this class is that all of us in here as professing believers will be faithful with what God has entrusted us with, okay? And we're going to talk about, that doesn't necessarily mean that you just take, extract all of your money and give it to the church, okay? It's not necessarily what it means. Maybe that is what it means for you. Maybe there's an opportunity where you really want to give most or all your money away. Maybe that's something but for most of us, we've got families that we have to provide for, right? And that's something that God has called us to do, is provide for our families, okay? But if you're not following some of these practical financial principles, it's way too easy to drive past that neighborhood and say, I want that house, I want that house, I want that house, and I'm going to do what it takes to get in that house. I love that house. Okay, your flesh will drive you off. Okay? So we need to have a plan in place. You need to get a budget in place. You need to have some goals set. You need to be thinking about retirement. You need to be thinking about giving. I think that's something that all of us as believers are called to be doing, is giving regularly. You need to be thinking about getting rid of those debts, stop being slaves to those other things, to this world. If you're an American citizen, you are a consumer, okay? I'm a consumer and you're a consumer, and that's how we think about money. We think about, I want that, I'm going to get it. I've saved up a little extra money, so I'm going to go spend it on me. That's how we think. It's just it. I was talking with a girl, this has been a few years ago, nobody in here knows her, but I was talking with a girl who's getting married, and she, the expenses were outgrowing the budget, so she said to her mom, well, just make a bigger budget. Oh, wait a minute, that's not how budgeting works. You can't just make a bigger budget. There's no money tree. Budgeting is the idea you look at everything you have and you carve it up in a wise way that's that's planning, that's intentional. It's exactly what we're going to do. It's going to be a little different for every single family here. It's going to be a little different for you, but you need to look at what you have coming in. You need to look at what you're going out and make a plan for what's happening in the future. Don't get caught off track by these really shrewd marketing schemes out there. They're going to talk you into getting the backup camera in that house and all that other stuff. Have a plan in place, know what you can spend, and know why you're spending it, where you're spending it. Okay. I would like to wrap up here with, just so you're aware of the 7 baby steps, so you know what they are. These were original with Larry Burkett, not Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey credits Larry Burkett, and Crown is Larry Burkett's company. I think Larry Burkett has passed away. Is anybody familiar with the man? I think he's passed away. But he was a good guy. He was pretty boring to listen to. Okay, so Dave Ramsey livened up the same material, essentially the same exact material, livened it up a little bit and making more money off of it. But Larry Burkett was a good guy. He says right on his website they're all about the Great Commission. So I like that. That there's also more free resources available if you go look at their information. The baby steps he came up with, Larry Burkett. Baby step number 1: if you're starting from scratch and you know you need some help, you don't know where to start. Baby step number 1 is get $1,000 in the bank. Do it any way you can. Get it in the bank, and this is going to be a mini emergency fund. Get $1,000 in the bank and just let it sit there for a little while, okay? If you have to maybe save a little bit each week or each month or whatever, you got to cut costs, stop going out to eat, get that $1,000 as fast as you can. If you got to have a yard sale and sell some stuff, it's a good way to do it. We did a yard sale this summer, got $300. Hey, it's pretty nice. Get rid of some old junk. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted some space in my house. Too much junk laying around. Get that $1,000 in the bank and we'll use that as a mini emergency fund. Okay, step number 2 is the debt snowball, and we're going to be talking about these steps as well. Not exactly in the exact same order, but I want you to just be knowledgeable about what some of the best advisors out there are talking about. The debt snowball. The debt snowball works like this. Obviously, you're paying down your debts. And the financial gurus, and probably the way I would go personally, just because I'm weird like that, is I would pay down the highest interest rate first. Okay, so if you have a 20% interest rate debt, I want to focus on that one first because it's going to be killing you. And then maybe wait for the other ones, the lower interest rate ones, because they're not going to be hurting you as bad. And that's probably what I would do. The debt snowball is not that. The debt snowball is a popular method, and it's actually the one I think makes the most sense for most people. The debt snowball says pay off the smallest debt first. And then when you get rid of that, take that extra money that would have gone towards that debt and pay off the next smallest debt next. And then after you pay that one off, go to the next. If you've got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 debts lined up, organize them smallest to largest, pay them off one by one. And by the time you get to whatever your largest debt is, if that's your house, then you have a lot of extra free cash to be able to throw it at that or whatever other obligations you've got going on in your life at that time. So that's the debt snowball. We're going to talk a little bit about that in week 3. Okay, now after you've taken care of that, you've paid off all of your debts except your house, all of your debts except your house. So that would include your credit cards, your student loans. Okay, in step 2, you're trying to get rid of your car loans, your student loans, your credit cards. You're trying to get rid of anything that lays claim to your money that's a loan that has interest. You're trying to get rid of it unless it's your house. And then step 3, you need to be thinking about a bigger emergency fund because things happen. I love how Dave Ramsey puts it. If you buy a house, his 3 cousins will move in broke, desperate, and stupid. Bad things can happen. I'll be honest. This is a week ago, I think. Lauren and I had an unexpected expense. Got a bill from the doctor. No, it was not. We have some planned expenses. Obviously. I know what those bills are. We had one that was not part of the plan. Came back in the mail, $5,000. Bam! Yikes! $5,000. Okay, you gotta have a plan for that. Thankfully, we've been given the guidance and the wisdom to be saving, and we've been doing some of these things for a long time. Well, 6 years since we've been married. And, it's fine. We were planning for the unexpected, okay? So that's something you need to do. You need to get some savings. Typically, people say between 3 and 6 months. Not a bad thing to get a little more than that, maybe. You lose a job. That can happen. You might, depending on the industry you're in, it could take longer. And the level you're at might take longer. If you're an executive, the average unemployment for an executive who's been laid off is about 1.5 years. It's about 18 months, okay? Now, the lower level positions and entry level, obviously, you can go down to Walmart and get a job. But if you're trying to get into your niche, you need to plan. Maybe that could happen. Give yourself some wiggle room so that you're not, broke, desperate, and stupid. The next step after that is once you've got your emergency fund in place, now we can start thinking about long-term planning. That's 15% in your retirement account. And we're going to talk about that as well in week 4, 15% in retirement. That's really if your employer has a retirement plan, 15%. Okay, then that's more, if you're not accustomed to putting money in your retirement account, that kind of stinks. 15% of your total income is a lot, but that's step number 4. You need to work at that. A lot of tax advantages in that. Then after that, if you got kids, you want to send them to college, big expense there. Start planning for that. Plan for your own retirement first. It's kind of the old oxygen mask in the airplane principle. Put yours on first, and then you can, help your kids out. And all the moms went, but that's how it. This is how the principle works. It'd be great if you send your kids off to college, they become millionaires, and then they take care of you. Let's not bank on that, okay? That would be awesome, but let's not bank on that being the case. Then we get to the place where you're paying off the house, and typically homes are smaller interest rate, and that's because they're what we call in the financial world a secured loan. And that means it can be taken back, okay? And they can recoup some losses. That's why the interest rate is smaller. A car, a house, those are secured loans. And, they typically, not always, but typically, depending on the kind of lender they perceive you to be, you're going to come with smaller interest rates. And that's why you want to focus on your unsecured loans first, because they're going to be 15, 18, 20, 25% interest. That's what Dave Ramsey calls stupid on steroids, paying interest like that. Okay, that's big time. That's going to keep you in the lower end of the economic spectrum for a long time when you're paying that much of your income to just interest. That's bad news. Okay, so that's a little bit about secured and unsecured loans. Lastly, build wealth and give is kind of how the Dave Ramsey team puts it. But really, remember, we want to get to a place where we are flexible in our finances to where we can really focus in on doing what's best for the Great Commission and living in a way that brings honor and glory to the Lord. And really, that's where step 7, it's getting us to a place where we are more flexible than we've ever been in our entire life for giving and going and spending time and energy. I do know a guy who retired from his job, had enough to be able to send himself in his retirement years to the mission field. Okay? That's something we should pray towards the reality of being completely surrendered to every last penny. If that's not where you are now, begin praying towards that reality. To every last penny that's in your bank account, you are completely, 100% surrendered. We're going to focus on some stewardship principles, and that includes planning, that includes saving, and that includes retirement accounts, and that, putting money away. It includes all of that. But remember, the end goal is not just providing for yourself. There's more to it than that, okay? Let's pray.